How are you this evening? Welcome to my Thursday evening sip and sews. My name is Kelsey and I am from the online quilt shop Just Sew. And every other Thursday night this summer I'm going to be going live here on our Facebook page with a tutorial or a demo or some sort of educational quilting video. And tonight, well, maybe not particularly quilting because tonight we're finishing up a bag project. So 2 weeks ago, we started this Sew Together bag. This is my pattern. This is available on our website, justsewstudio.com. The Sew Together bag pattern. So if you want to follow along in this video, you will have had to have watched part 1. But if you haven't watched part 1 and you want to, it is available for replay, and you can come back and watch this one later. Hi, Cindy and Darlene. Thanks for tuning in with me tonight. So we have the Sew Together bag, sip and sew, sew along, part 2 going on tonight. All right, I'm going to show you guys the stage that we left off in 2 weeks ago and where we're going to start from today. So let's move over to the desktop. Okay. So here are all of my elements. So we're going to work with these 2 pieces tonight to create the sides of our bag. And then we have 3 different binding pieces, long, medium, and short. We'll use that. We have our long zipper. I'm using a 22-inch zipper, but we are going to be cutting it down to 18 inches. And then we have the main thing that we worked on last time was creating the lining and zipper pouch piece. So on the back side here, this is what it looks like. And we flip it over, and we have our lining and our pocket lining and our zippers. And then, if you remember, we also have our exterior, which we didn't do anything with last week, but if you want to have it quilted, then you will need to have done so by this point. So here's my exterior. I quilted it using a piece of fusible fleece. If you purchased a Sew Together bag kit from us, then your bag would have come with fusible fleece. There's a couple different things to keep in mind when choosing your stabilizer for the back side of your exterior. The pattern does call for batting or fusible fleece only if you're quilting. If you're not quilting, I would still suggest using a lightweight interfacing, such as the 1/2 yard of lightweight interfacing that you use for the rest of the bag, just getting more of that and using it here. But if you are quilting, you'll want something a little stiffer. So I used fusible fleece. You can also just use batting. And I've also used soft and stable before, which is much thicker. It's like a foam. And I like the stability that added, but I'm looking forward to seeing how the fusible fleece holds up. Hi, Susan and Lauren. Thanks for joining me tonight. Okay, so if you open up your pattern, let's find where we left off. Optional pincushion and or needle landing. So I do want a needle landing in mind, but I don't have any felt right now. So I'm not going to sew that in. I might sew it in by hand later on if I want one. This is just like a piece of felt. Here's my finished bag right here. I'll show you. A piece of felt right here that you can put your needles in. So I do use mine. So I think I will want one, but I forgot that I don't have any felt here. So if you do have felt and you want to put a needle landing, now is when you would do that. So you'll just have your lining here and figure out where on either this side or this side you want that needle landing, and you can also put a pincushion on one of those if you want as well. So I'm going to skip that step for now, but that is when you would want to do that. So the next thing that we're going to go to is attaching the side panels. So this is page 7, and you are going to need your side panel template that you cut out of your pattern because you're going to use it for these press lines. So let's set these aside for now. And look here. So you'll need a marking pen of some kind. Nancy, I did not put a pincushion in mine, so I can't show you what it looks like. It looks like they don't have it depicted on the pattern either, so I did not put a pincushion in mine. Okay, so make sure that you're familiar with what side is your exterior and what side is your lining so that you don't accidentally do it backwards, unless you want to do it backwards. Honestly, you could. Maybe, let me see if I want to do mine backwards. So, let's see, it could be fun. That would be having the button side facing in, and then this side facing out. Be on this side. So that would just be a different look, give you a bit of an accent. I might do that. So figure out which side you want facing out and which side you want facing in. And then you're going to mark. You're going to mark 3 lines. So the first line is going to be right down the middle. So I'm actually going to do it like this. I think it says, using the side panels that were set aside, mark and press. So I think I'm just going to press instead of using a marking pen because that marking pen is iron off. So I'm just going to put a quick crease right here down the middle. On that piece and on my other piece as well. So you'll do all of these steps times 2 for both of your side panels. Okay, and then next you're going to use this to mark where this dotted line is. So here, let me see, how do I want to do this? I use a pin. And fold it flush on both these sides. Alright, I'm going to put a crease in here now. And again, with this side, right here. So this is what it currently looks like. Again, make sure that you keep track of what side you want facing out and what side you want facing in. I kind of like a little bit of a scrappy mismatch look, so I am going to swap my lining and my exterior for this one. I think I did that for my other, so I got it back. I've made 2 of these, and I think one of them I made them matching, one that I made them switched. All right, last crease. So those are our 3 creases. We can set that template aside now. Hi, Annie. Just saw your comment, sorry. I'm not looking at the screen with the comments on it right now. Okay, at the center fold on the side panel, sandwich the side panel around the center pocket. So here's our pockets. And we're going to sandwich this center crease around the side pocket. I'm gonna cut off the end of my scissor tape. So, a few things to keep in mind when doing this. This is going to be taller than your zipper, so that's fine. But you also want this raw edge as far back into this crease as you can, and you also want this as flush with the bottom as you can. So take a second to make sure that you adjust that how you need to. I'm going to use wonder clips because this is kind of a thick sandwich to put together here. At the bottom and all the way in, because you're not going to sew a very deep seam allowance, so you want to make sure that it's really pushed back here. Okay, so place the bottom of the side panel on the bottom stitch line of the center pocket. There should be an additional 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch of the side panel that extends above the top of the pocket. Sew a 1/4 inch seam beginning at the bottom of the pocket and sewing toward the zipper. Be very careful as you sew towards the zipper. It's extremely easy to hit the metal stopper right here. So you want to avoid hitting the metal stopper. Hi, Julianne. Part 1 can be found on our Facebook videos for now. Eventually it will also be on YouTube. But if you go to our Facebook page and click on the videos button on the menu, then you can scroll back just a couple videos ago to find part 1. When sewing toward the zipper pull, open up the zipper to get it. So just make sure your zipper pulls away from whatever end you're sewing. Open up the seams to make sure you've sewn through all the layers. So once we sew this, we'll kind of tug at it to make sure we've sewn everything correctly in place. Repeat this process for the additional pockets and the other side panel. Place the bottom of the side panel on the bottom stitch line of the center pocket. Let me just make sure I understand what that part means real quick. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and take this over to the sewing machine. And we're going to sew 1/4 inch down here. Oops, this one. This is the one. Angle this around for you guys a little bit. Okay. So it tells us to do it from the bottom up. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, and I have white thread in here right now, which is what I want, but at some point when we do the binding, we're going to be doing top stitching, and so then I might change my thread color. I'm going to back tack. It's going through a lot of layers, so it might sound a little heavier than usual. And keep an eye on your metal zipper stop right here. Back stitch, going off and back stitching. I just like to be careful with these things. I back stitch twice. And I'm going to cut my little tails off. So these stitches are going to show as you're deciding what color thread. These stitches right here will show in your finished product. So, all right. Now what we're going to do, now that we have that sewn around the end of that zipper, we're going to repeat that process and sew it around our other two pockets as well. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut off my zipper tape. It's just the little tail hanging off right here, if you haven't already done that. And I'm going to take this other tail right here of the side panel and wrap it around with that crease, wrap it around the raw edges of that pocket. Make sure that the raw edges are completely flush with the bottom here, and also that the raw edges of your pocket are completely inside of that crease as well. So here we're creating the second little opening. This is what it looks like. And I purposefully switched my fabric because I wanted an accent on the inside, but make sure that you have this situated how you want it. And at this point, you're also going to have to be working around, like, so that you're not sewing on any wrong layers as well. So when you put this on your sewing machine like this, make sure that you're not sewing this pocket to this as well. So hold that out of the way. It did say on the other one to go from bottom to top, but I feel like for that reason I'm going to go from top to bottom. I don't think that should mess with anything. I'm just going to do that. Just make sure everything stays tight and where you fit it. Okay, so here's what that looks like now. And now we're just going to do that to the last pocket over here. My pink one was my middle zipper, and then my two blue ones are the outside. So let's do that to our last one. And this time I am going to do it from the bottom to the top, just however you need it to be, so that you don't sew anything down that's not supposed to be sewn down. That's the thing about bags that I've learned, is that at some point in the process of making a bag, you get to a point where you've got a lot of pieces to keep track of and make sure you don't sew anything to where it's not supposed to be. Make sure I'm not going to hit my zipper stopper. Okay. All right, so here we have one side panel complete. It's going to go along this side here. So now we just need to do the same thing to the other side. We've already prepped this by making all of the creases. So now we're just going to unzip all of your pockets at least halfway so that you don't accidentally sew over the zipper. And start on the middle and work your way out. So starting at the middle here, make sure that the bottom is flush with the bottom and that your pocket is snugly inside that little sandwich that you're creating. And we're going to start sewing from the bottom of the pocket to the top. I always enjoy seeing how pattern designers use creative ways of hiding their raw edges. So this time, instead of doing these pockets like right sides together and flipping them out, which would mean that you'd have raw edges in the middle of your pocket, or in the inside of your pockets, she's kind of created a casing for them using the side panels, which I think is really smart. So I'm very intrigued when I make anything, but especially something as complicated as a bag, to see how the designers worked out those problems. I'm very much like that. Like when I watch a movie or read a book, I'm always thinking, wow, how did they write that, or how did they like direct that, or whatever. So when I learn new patterns, I think that a lot about designers. Okay, this is the one I'm actually going to start on the top to keep my other pocket out of the way. Hopefully you have a machine that can accommodate lots of layers, because bags also tend to usually start to build up their layers as you go. Alright, cutting off the zipper tape one last time. And I'm just going to fold that around here. Having that crease actually does really help, rather than just have a mark, because the crease kind of created a spot where it's all ready to like slip into, if that makes sense. Alright, this is our last one of that. Okay, so now we have both of these side panels sewn on to our zipper pouches. Our raw edges have been hidden, and I'm just going to double check all of these to make sure I sewed everything in place. Okay, all I'm seeing is this last one that I did here did slip out a tiny bit. Oh, it's because I didn't cut off my zipper tape like I did for all my other ones. Somehow I missed that. Okay. So I guess cutting off that zipper tape is more important than I thought, because that pushed out my pocket far enough it didn't get caught in the 1/4 inch seam here. So I'm just going to take that out and restitch that one. I feel like you haven't really made a bag unless you've had to rip something out. I can usually get through a whole quilt fairly often without having to rip out very much, if anything, but bags and other things, I'm just like, okay, my seam ripper is my best friend. I'm going to be filming a video, hopefully tomorrow, maybe next week, for you guys, as I'm working on our YouTube library of videos, with a little like sewing room tour, and then I have a couple tutorials that I want to film as well. But in case you didn't know, all of these sip and sews are available for replay not only on Facebook, but I'm also getting them all on YouTube. So most of them I've already transferred over so far. So they're all on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is Just Sew Studio. You can find us there. These back stitches are not wanting to come out. There we go. I'm using my retractable seam ripper and it's not wanting to stay open. Okay, just clean up these little pieces real quick. And we trim off all this excess stuff. I have lots of tails and unraveling pieces everywhere, and that tends to drive me crazy. Okay, let's try this one more time, and then we'll be done with this step. Make sure everything is snug. All right, much better. All right, so let's go back to the table and read the next instructions. Here's what we have so far. So now we need to connect this to the bottom of the bag and put some binding on here. So we have we're reading step 7. Lay the lining and the exterior wrong sides together. Something you don't hear very often. So here's my exterior wrong side up and my lining wrong side down. And we're actually fairly, let's see here. It's funny how this side is more correct and this side is a little bit more off. But they do say that it's normal to be off a little bit. It's very common that they don't fit if the lining is too short. Okay, so we can trim the exterior if it's too big, but first let's see how too big it is. Oh, I think, you know what, actually, let me measure the exterior to make sure I trimmed it. It's supposed to be, let me find the cutting. 13.5 by 9 3/4. So I didn't fully trim this after I quilted it, so that's why it's a little long. So let me trim it real quick. It is 9 3/4, but it's not 13.5. Okay. Now let's see. All right. Very, very close. Only off a little bit on this one side. Okay. So, step 7. Okay. Attach the lining to the exterior. Align the exterior to the lining wrong sides together. Match the center pocket of the lining and the center of the long edges of the exterior. Pin the edges on both sides. To sew the sides of the lining and the exterior together, you will need to fold the pockets flat so that the edges lay flat together. Do this one side at a time, folding the pockets to the left as you push the side panel flat. So we're going to sew the lining to the exterior while we sew the side panels to the exterior as well, to close the bottom here. So all of the raw edges are going to be on the outside and the inside is going to be completely clean. So we're going to start by marking the center of our exterior as we pin or clip, however you prefer to do that. Marking our center. And we're going to use that to line up our center pockets. Actually, I'm going to clip. And these pockets will all need to be laying flat as well. Make sure you can see what I'm doing here. And the edges of the side panels will not reach the edge of the project right here. Like it's supposed to be a little short. Okay, I'm going to clip these little corners from my side panels off. Don't need those. All right. Be aware the diagonals of the side panels do not reach all the way. Stitch the sides using a zigzag stitch over the edge or a straight stitch using no more than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So whether you want to zigzag it or do a straight stitch, I'm going to start and I'm going to do this side before I pin the other side. Because I want to just get this all down here. I think it's going to be too bulky to try to clip both of those at once. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this one down. Okay, I'm going to use a straight stitch and I'm going to start from the middle and work my way out and then go to the middle on the other side. And I'm actually going to replace one of my clips with a pin so that it will lie flat here, and then I'll get started. So I replace one of my clips with that pin. Let's work it in here. And I'm holding the pockets over here and the side panel flat as I go, taking out my clips as I get closer to them. Okay, and normally you would, when sewing the other side here, you'd probably flip it down and do it that way, but I want to be able to look at it, so I'm going to slip it in here on my right side of my needle. Which is not how I'm, oh, I have a 1/4 inch part in there, let me swap it out. Not how I'm used to sewing, but it's just for a small portion. So it's telling us to make sure to use no more than a 1/4 inch seam, which means we want it to be on the narrow side of things. So you could just zigzag this if you want, but I know that we're going to be binding it, so I might as well do a straight stitch, and I feel like that'll help it lay a little flatter. But you could zigzag and then do a straight stitch, or just do one or the other. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I don't have any holes in my pockets. I got everything situated. Looks good, looks good. So that's what that one side looks like. I'm going to go ahead and clip the other. Alright, and I will trim off this excess of the exterior once I sew this other side. Go ahead and sew that. Bye, Kathy. All right, sounds good. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing where I take out one of these clips. I'm going to replace it with a pin to help me get started so I can fit it under my needle. Alrighty, half of that one is sewn shut. Let's do the other side. Okay, and then the pattern kind of encourages you by saying, it's by no means perfect, but it will work out in the end, which makes me feel like the author of this had to wrestle with it a little bit. So if you're struggling with it, don't worry, it'll be fine. Okay. All right. I'm going to now sew my short sides together and then trim off my excess exterior. I'm just going to use a pretty narrow seam allowance on this. Okay, other side here. Now I do remember the last time I made this, the binding being the hardest part, so you might think that the zippers would be the hardest part. No. The binding is. So we're going to jump into that next. Square this up. I'm lining up my bottom edge here on a straight line, so I know that that's straight, so that I can true this to a straight line here. And you don't want to cut off more than a 1/4 inch, as long as what's kind of what's missing over here is like less than a 1/4 inch of a difference, and mine is, so that'll be hidden by my binding. All right, let's move on to the next step, binding. Okay, I'm going to turn you guys around here for this part, my editing board. Okay, it says, using a 15-inch strip, which that is our medium-sized one. All right, so I have my 15-inch strips, our medium-sized binding strip. Place the binding, press the side bindings and zipper bindings in half widthwise, wrong sides together. So let's do that for all of these first. We're going to press them in half. My fabric is the same color as my ironing board cover, but I'm folding it in half, wrong sides together, like you do for a quilt binding. Alright, so the two 15-inch, I'm going to go ahead and do my other long ones, but not the short ones. The short ones are going to be done a little differently. The short ones are going to be more of a zipper tab than a binding. And they're going to be our last step. Okay, So let's take our 15-inch bindings over to our bag. Place the binding on one lining edge matching the raw edges. Sew the binding down 1/4 inch. It's not telling me which side, but I'm assuming it's the longer of the two. Oh, I really like that. I love how the accent side looks. Yes, the top edge bindings include the 18-inch zipper. So this is this edge. Okay, so this edge that we just worked with, stitch in the ditch on the lining side, turn the folded edge over. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do, just give me a second while I change out my thread. So if you want, this is the rest of the steps with the binding, you're going to be able to see the stitches on the outside of the bag pretty obviously. So if you want to switch out your thread color, now is the time to do so. I'm going to use this 2830 by Aurifil, which matches my fabric. And I'm also going to switch out my bobbin, which I already had one thankfully, so nice and quick. All right. And this says, some pattern testers prefer to do this step by placing the binding piece on the exterior so it's going to be longer because that side of our exterior piece is 13.5 inches and this is 15, but it's not telling us to match the centers. So I'm assuming that means we're just going to trim off the excess. It doesn't tell us that though, but I'm looking at my sample here and I think that's just what's going to happen. So we're just going to go with it. Some pattern testers prefer to place the binding piece on the exterior, like this, and then fold it over and top stitch on the other side. So let's do it that way. Let's try it out. 1/4 inch. So that means we're going to sew with the raw edges coming together here. 1/4 inch away from the edge. And I'm going to work kind of slowly with this as I press my pockets and such out of the way underneath. For my bindings, I really like to choose an accent color. So I really like this blue because this blue is on both sides. It's on the lining and the exterior, but it really makes these turquoise buttons pop. So I like to choose my binding that way. As you reach these really thick layers where the zipper pockets are, I find it helpful to pull from the other side ever so slightly to just encourage the feed dogs to keep the fabric moving. it over. Looks like it's going to work out pretty well. So we'll turn, I'm actually going to turn it in the center and clip it, and then work my way out to one of the edges and clip as well to make sure I'm not, sometimes when you're putting binding on, you can accidentally tug the top away so it's like diagonal, like stretched away from the back side of it, if that makes sense. So I just want to make sure I'm not doing that. So I'm going to clip it at a few spots. And we'll just take those out as we go. And you want to make sure that your previous stitches that you used to sew that side shut are covered by the bias tape. So mine are. And I'm just going to top stitch it. So I'm going to sew about 1/8 of an inch, not even 1/8 of an inch, like a hair over from the folded edge here. I want to make sure it's even because my stitches will be seen from both sides. As even as it can be. We'll see. All right, this is the test. Turn it over to the other side and see how it looks. Oh, not bad. So I can see my stitches just a hair over from the binding, but it's overall pretty even. There's just one spot in here where I got really close, right on top of that binding for a couple stitches at my thickest pocket. But I'm happy with that. That's fine. It's also on the bottom, so when this is on the on like a table that you're using, then you won't be able to really see it. And honestly, when you're looking at it, you can see these stitches more often than you can see these stitches, at least on the bottom side of it. Okay, so we're going to do that same thing to the other side. So the first one, I'm not going to pin at all. I'm just going to start with my 1/4 inch. Okay, looks good. Now I'm going to turn it around to the other side to hide these raw edges here. Check this one out. Looks pretty good. And now I'm going to, I think I'm just going to trim these tails off at the end. And as I'm reading, it doesn't have us do that anywhere, but I know that we're going to have to for when we put the binding on this side. So let's trim that off. The top bindings include the 18-inch zipper. All right, let's go over back to the table. Matching the center of the zipper with the center of the top edge. So I'm actually going to cut my zipper, which is very easy to do. I'm just going to start with the zipper stopper at the other edge and measure it 18 inches right here. And I'm just going to cut it about a ½ inch away to allow for that tail of the zipper tape that would normally be there. And there we go. Okay. Matching the center of the zipper, so let's mark the center of our zipper. Nine and a half inches. With the center of the top edge, let's measure this out on both sides here. Pin the zipper right side up to the lining. So we have our lining here, right side up, matching these centers. Center the binding on top of this. So let's go grab our long pieces of binding. Make our center for this. And pin those matched centers together. The binding and the zipper extend way beyond the main body of the bag. This zipper sandwich is lining right side up, zipper right side up, binding. Using a zipper foot, sew the binding piece down to the zipper through all the layers, just as you did in the previous bindings. Turn the folded edge over to the exterior and pin in place. Stitch in the ditch on the lining side to make sure you catch the fold. Do the same for the other side of the zipper. This can be a little tricky, but opening and closing the zipper to move the zipper pull helps. Stitch the open end of the zipper together. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to sew from the very edge over here all the way across here to the very edge over here. And then we're going to turn the binding over and encase these raw edges in the binding, because these are our only remaining raw edges. But we are going to have to finagle with this zipper pull like we usually do. So I'm going to open that a little bit, and I'm going to make sure I have this all the way out here where it's supposed to be. And we're going to start sewing from over here. After we're done sewing both sides of the zipper to both sides of the bag, then we're going to sew this open end shut. And then the last step is to put a little piece of fabric, I'll show you here. Your smaller binding piece is going to connect the end of the zipper to the base of the bag here, and that is the trickiest part. I remember struggling with that one, just trying to fit the bag under the machine. So we'll get there when we get there. Almost there though. Look guys, we almost have a complete bag. This looks so cool. All right, I'm going to take this over to the machine. Cindy, it's interesting how easy it is to cut zippers. I feel like you would think that it would be hard, but I've cut metal zippers too, and it's not that difficult. But you do usually want to, like the cut edge of your zipper, you do usually want to stitch back and forth over the teeth a little bit to create a zipper stop. But because we are about to put a little piece of fabric here to like connect it to the bottom of the bag, I'm not really going to bother with that because the fabric will stop the zipper so it doesn't come off. But if that's something you're worried about in the meantime, you can just stitch back and forth over the teeth 6 or 7 times, and it'll create a false like zipper stop basically. So all right, this part's a little weird because it's so flimsy. We're just sewing the, I need to put my zipper foot on. We're just sewing the binding to the zipper. But that's what we're supposed to do. So, let's line these up. Actually, what I'm going to do, and this is a little iffy for me, I'm going to put a pin in it so that all the way out to the very edge, this is lined up. So that helps me a little bit. Just feeling where my zipper starts. All right, and as we approach the beginning of the bag, we're going to need to make sure that these are all lined up again. But first I want to get just close enough where I can close this zipper without it being in the way of all the bulk of the bag. There we go. Much easier that way. Getting onto the bag here, you can feel it got thicker, and just keep going. All right, and we're off the bag and we're just doing the binding and zipper tape again. All right, let's take a look. How'd this turn out? All right, it's pretty good to me. I usually like to test to make sure I didn't accidentally stitch over the teeth anywhere. But be careful, you don't want to take your zipper off here if you cut your zipper because it's very hard to put back on. Okay, so this looks exactly how it's supposed to look. The zipper is facing the right way and everything. So we're going to go ahead, fold the binding over onto the other side and start clipping it. And this one I want to make sure I clip carefully because I am going to stitch it from the zipper side, so that I can make sure I'm not sewing on any of the teeth, but that means I could miss the binding on this side. So I just want to make sure that I'm clipping it pretty evenly so that I don't ever miss part of that. Okay, we're going to continue as we move off of the bag and onto just the zipper tape. again, we're gonna want to unzip and then zip the zipper again. I'm using a pin for this last part. Go. All right. One more clip and a pin, and then we'll be good to go. All right, here I have this. Let's stitch it on there. So I'm just top stitching the binding. I am sewing it onto the binding on this side, just barely. I'm hoping that'll make it look more even on the other side as well. Lots of wonder clips on this one. All right, let's see how the other side looks. Okay. All right. All right, so you can see it's about that far in. I got a little uneven at one point. I don't even know like what causes that because this edge is very straight. So I don't know. I'm fine with it. It depends on how you feel. If you want this to be perfect, you might want to sew from the other side, but then I would just be afraid that you might stitch over the teeth. So figure out which side you want to stitch on. But now we're going to open up our zipper and line it up with the other side. Let's mark the center of our binding again. And then make sure your zipper is not twisted before laying it on here and clipping. I'm going to go ahead and clip this together so that it's not pulling so much. right, just taking this over to the machine. Sorry, I feel like I need to use my whole body to keep this bag out of the way. Once it starts to take shape, it becomes so bulky. I need to unzip my zipper, but I didn't tack it like I said you probably should. So I'm going to put a pin in here to stop the zipper from unzipping all the way. And keep going. Gosh, makes you work up a sweat. Oh, okay, hold on. I'm gonna have to get in here. Because this wasn't attached to the actual bag. Okay, gonna pin it so that will help. This was sewing on just the tape and not on the bag itself. It's very hard to keep all these layers together. All right, so I'm just gonna re-sew over that one part. Back stitch, that's how I'm restarting. My pen. Lots of focus going into this step. This is the part where I would start crying if my bobbin was out. That whole time. But it's not, it's fine. Okay. All right, I'm going to fold it over so we can put it on the other side. And then we are almost there. Okay. We make it. Yes. Yes, we can. This is really when you want your stitches to blend in, so I'm glad I changed my thread color, because if you're just off a little bit, it's in a pretty obvious spot, but you most likely are going to be off a little bit just because this is so precarious. So I'm going to unzip this zipper. Go. Keep going. Okay. Did everybody make it? Okay. Gonna make sure I can zip this up all the way, which I can. Make sure that nothing in my binding is crazy or wonky. Okay, so now we're going to stitch the open end of the zipper shut. So right here, I'm going to stitch these two sides together. I'm going to use a pin. And switch out my foot for a regular presser foot. And just stitch back and forth a couple times right past the zipper teeth. right, guys, I think this is the last step, step number 9. You're almost there, the zipper tabs. All right, we're gonna go back to the iron just real quick. And I have my 2 short zipper tabs here. So, fold the 1 3/4 by 6-inch tabs in half lengthwise with right sides together and press. This makes a piece 1 3/4 times 3. Right sides together. Long lengthwise, press. My iron needs to wake up. Fold the raw edges into the fold, wrong sides together, and press. So we're going to fold the raw, okay, hold on, my iron's there we go. Fold the raw edges into the fold, wrong sides together. So my raw edges right here into the fold right here and press. So I'm just going to have it like 1/8 of an inch away from the fold, my wrong sides together on both sides, make them even. So this is what we have. We're going to sew these 2 sides shut, turn it right sides out, and then we just have an open fold that we're going to slip the end of our zipper in. So let's do that one more time. All right, back to the sewing machine. Almost there, you guys. You're doing it. Okay, 1/4 of an inch on these 2 sides, so not the side that has this folded edge, the 2 raw edge sides. So here's what this finished one looks like. You can see there's the wrong side peeking through where the fold is. So we're just going to do that and then flip these right sides out. Use my seam ripper. Clip the corners first. So the corners, not the edge with the opening, but the other edge. Clip those corners off. Don't cut off your stitches. And we're going to turn, it's such a tiny piece. So you do want to have back stitch this because turning right sides out puts a lot of pressure on those seams. Can't tell if my nails are making this easier or harder. Okay. It's very tiny. Okay, I'm going to use my seam ripper to help me pull out some of these other sides. And then I'm going to use my purple thing here to poke out the corners. Okay, do this other one. Okay, and I assume we're going to press these as well. Yes, press well. All right, gonna press these real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, so now we have these little tabs with openings on one side, and that is what we're going to slip the end of our zipper in. So I'm going to cut off the tails of the bias of the binding that we have here. And take out my pin. Open the zipper and stitch the zipper tab to the side binding. Stitch the zipper tab to the side binding at the center of the edge of the bag, stitching in the same place where you stitch in the ditch. It says slip the end of the zipper in first. We'll try that for the first one and see how it goes, because that's the part that was the order last time, and that was a little tricky. Okay, so here's one of my zipper ends. Let's stick this in here. Okay, so now my zipper is that far up my zipper tab. I don't really want to push it that much further because I want to make sure that this doesn't have a lot of bulk for when we attach it to this side right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch this in place. Back stitching at the beginning and the end. And I just want a couple more tails hanging out here. I'm going to trim off. Okay, so that's what one side looks like. We're going to pull it down and stitch it right there. Give me just 1 second. Do this other one real quick. Okay, let's go ahead and we're going to center this at the bottom here where the middle pocket is. So squishing this down like this will help a little bit with that, but this is the part that's a little bit tricky, getting your needle in through that loop. So this part's a little hard, but then once we're done with this, we're done with the whole bag. So we can do this. Squishes down here. This back a little bit. Okay. Okay, trim off these tails. Now we just have our last one to do, you guys. Got this in there. Just gotta do this one. I got my zipper stuck on the top here. Oh, man, come on. There we go. Okay, I thought I broke my needle for a second. Try that again. Going very slowly. Okay, so what happens, so you can keep an eye out for this, is that the top of the bag right here got stuck at the top of the needle bar going down. But, sorry, let me look at your comments, Elizabeth, in a second. What if you sewed it? What if you used the sleeve option? Okay, let me sewed it from the bottom. Like sewed it with this at the top. You could, but then you just honestly run into the same issue no matter what direction you're sewing from, because then you have to make sure you don't sew it onto here or sewing it from here, that you don't get this caught in the needle bar. You could try, if you find a better way to do that, let me know, because all 3 times I've made this bag, that's been my least favorite part. But it's the last step, and now you have a finished sew together bag. Let me know if you finish yours or if you're close, and when you have finished it, I'd love for you to post a picture of your finished project in the Just Sew Along Facebook group so that I can see the bag that you made, watching the sew-alongs. I love doing these for you guys, especially if it's a project I've been wanting to do. Next time is going to be in 2 weeks from now, and we're going to be making a Bitsy box. I don't actually have a sample here with me. I have one at the shop. It's just a little tiny box this big. If you got through the Sew Together bag, you'll get through the Bitsy box, no problem. Hey, Cindy and Lauren. Yeah, no problem. Glad this was helpful for you guys. I'm working on my plan for after next time, what will come after that. So if you guys have any requests or questions or anything like that for projects moving forward after the Bitsy box, let me know and I'll put it on my list. But other than that, thank you so much, you guys, for watching. I hope that you feel accomplished and that this helps you finish your Sew Together bag. Oh, good, Kim. Awesome. You have to post a picture of it for me. All right, I'll see you guys next Wednesday or 2 weeks from now at the next Sew Along. Bye. Have a good night.